The wall was cold against Lady Elara's cheek. It smelled of centuries-old dust and dry rot. She pressed her eye to the tiny knothole in the wood panelling, holding her breath until her lungs burned. On the other side of the wall, in the library of Blackwood Manor, the enemy was pouring a drink. General Silas Vance, the Wolf of the North, the man who had conquered her province in 3 days. He was tall, wearing the charcoal-grey uniform of the invading army. He tossed his gloves onto her father's desk, the desk where the rebellion had been planned, and poured himself a glass of her father's brandy. Elara gripped the dagger in her pocket. She was the last of the Blackwoods. Her father was dead on the battlefield. Her brothers were in exile. The servants had fled. She was the only one left, hiding in the priest-hole behind the fireplace, guarding the list of rebel names sewn into her corset. She watched the general. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. He rubbed his temples, staring at the portrait of Elara's mother hanging above the mantel. A knock at the door shattered the silence. "Enter," Vance commanded. A lieutenant marched in, clicking his heels. "General, the men have searched the grounds. No sign of the Lady Elara. She must have fled with the servants." Vance took a sip of brandy. "Good. If she has fled, she survives. If we find her, the king's orders are to hang her as a traitor." Elara flinched in the wall. "Hang her! Burn the crops, Lieutenant," Vance ordered, his voice flat. "But leave the manor standing. It will be my headquarters for the winter." "Yes, sir." "And the prisoner? The stable boy we found?" Vance paused. "Let him go. He knows nothing. He is a boy, not a soldier." But Colonel Draven said, "I command this army, not Colonel Draven." Vance slammed his glass down. "Release the boy." The lieutenant pale, saluted, and left. Elara frowned in the darkness. The Wolf of the North showed mercy. It didn't fit the stories. She watched him sink into the leather chair, her father's chair, and close his eyes. He looked less like a conqueror and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. For 3 days, Elara lived in the walls. She knew the priest holes better than anyone. She had played in them as a child. She moved like a ghost between the floors. When the soldiers slept, she crept out into the pantry to steal apples and hard cheese. She listened to their war councils through the vents. She was the invisible eyes of the rebellion. But hunger makes you careless. On the 4th night, a storm raged outside. The house was loud with the creaking of timber and the howling of wind. Elara thought the noise would mask her movements. She slipped out of the panel in the library to grab a book. She was going mad with boredom in the dark. She grabbed a volume of poetry and turned to scurry back to her hole. Lightning flashed, and there, standing in the doorway, was General Vance. He didn't shout. He didn't draw his sword. He simply stood there, illuminated by the flash, watching her. "Lady Elara, I presume," he said softly. Elara froze. She reached for her dagger, but her hand was shaking so badly she dropped it. It clattered on the floor. Vance stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He locked it. "You are thinner than your portrait," he observed, walking toward her. "Stay back," Elara hissed, backing against the cold stone of the fireplace. "I will scream." "And alert my men?" Vance asked, raising an eyebrow. "There are 200 soldiers in this house, my lady. Every one of them has orders to drag you to the gallows. Screaming seems like a poor strategy." Elara stopped. He was right. She was trapped. She lifted her chin. "Then do it. Call them. I am a Blackwood. I am not afraid to die." Vance stopped a few feet away. He looked at her dirty dress, her tangled hair, the defiance burning in her eyes. He picked up the dagger she had dropped. He tested the edge with his thumb. "Dull," he critiqued. "You wouldn't have pierced my coat." He handed it back to her, handle first. Elara stared at it. "Why?" "Because I am tired of killing Blackwoods," Vance said wearily. "Your father was a worthy opponent. He died with honour. I have no desire to see his daughter swinging from a rope." He walked past her to the fireplace. He tapped the wood panelling. "The priest hole?" he asked. Elara nodded, clutching the dagger. "Smart," Vance muttered, "but the draughts are terrible. You must be freezing." He took off his heavy wool coat and threw it at her. She caught it instinctively. It was warm, smelling of tobacco and rain. "Go back in the wall, Elara," he said, turning his back to pour a drink. "If my men find you, I cannot stop them. Colonel Draven arrives in 2 days. He is less sentimental than I am. Stay hidden." Elara stared at his back. You aren't going to turn me in?" Vance sipped his brandy. "I saw a ghost tonight, a trick of the lightning. Nothing more." He didn't look at her again. Elara hesitated, then slipped back into the darkness of the wall, pulling the panel shut. For the next 2 days, the dynamic changed. Vance knew she was there. He began to leave things for her. A plate of roasted chicken left on the desk, by accident. A fresh pitcher of water. Once, a bar of lavender soap. He spoke to the room when he was alone, knowing she was listening. "The king is raising taxes again," he would say to the empty air. "It is foolish. The people are starving. A starving man fights harder than a paid soldier." Or, "It is snowing today. The pass to the north is blocked. The rebellion has time to regroup." Elara listened. He was feeding her intelligence. He was telling her that the war wasn't going well for the king. He was giving her hope. And, against her will, she began to feel something other than hatred. She saw him reprimand soldiers for looting. She saw him read the same poetry book she had tried to steal. He was a man trapped in a uniform he no longer believed in. Then, Colonel Draven arrived. Draven was a snake, thin, pale, with eyes that saw everything. He didn't come alone. He brought the Inquisitors, men in black masks, whose job was to hunt traitors. Elara watched through the knothole as Draven paced the library. "The rebellion is not dead, Silas," Draven hissed. "We intercepted a courier. He claims the rebel list, the names of every traitor in the province, is still in this house." "It is a rumour," Vance said calmly, sitting at the desk. "The house was empty when we arrived." "Is it?" Draven walked to the fireplace. He ran his hand over the mantel. "This house is old. It has secrets. I can smell them." He turned to the Inquisitors. "Tear it apart," Draven ordered. "Start with the walls, break every panel. If there is a hollow space, I want to see what bleeds out of it." Elara's heart stopped. Vance stood up. "That is unnecessary, Draven. This is my headquarters." "It is a crime scene," Draven snapped. "Proceed!" The Inquisitors raised their axes. "Stop!" Vance barked, but they didn't stop. The first axe smashed into the panelling, inches from Elara's face. She screamed. The sound echoed in the library. Draven smiled. A terrible, predatory smile. "Well, well," he whispered. "The mice are squeaking." He motioned to the guards. "Tear it down." The wood splintered. Hands grabbed Elara, dragging her out into the light. She kicked and fought, but they were too strong. They threw her to the floor at Draven's feet. "Lady Elara," Draven sneered, "you look like a rat." He grabbed her hair, pulling her head back. "Where is the list?" Elara spit in his face. Draven wiped the saliva away slowly. He drew his pistol. "I don't need the list to hang you," he said softly. "I can do it right here, on the chandelier." He pressed the cold barrel to her forehead. Elara closed her eyes. She thought of her father. She thought of the general who had tried to save her. A gunshot rang out. Elara flinched, waiting for the darkness. But she wasn't dead. She opened her eyes. Colonel Draven was stumbling back, a look of shock on his face. A red stain was spreading across his chest. He collapsed. Standing behind him, smoke curling from his pistol, was General Vance. The room froze. The soldiers stared at their general. He had just shot a colonel of the king. It was treason. It was death. Vance didn't hesitate. He tossed the empty pistol aside and drew his sword. "Anyone who touches her dies," Vance roared. The soldiers looked at Dreven's body. They looked at Vance, the wolf of the north, the man who had led them through 3 campaigns. They lowered their weapons. "General," the lieutenant asked, his voice shaking, "what have you done?" "I have resigned my commission," Vance said grimly. He grabbed Elara's hand, pulling her up. "Run!" He dragged her toward the secret passage behind the bookcase. A passage only she should have known about. "How?" she gasped as he shoved her into the dark tunnel. "How did you know about this? I studied the blueprints of this manor for 6 months before I attacked it," Vance said, lighting a torch. "I knew every hiding spot. I knew you were in the wall from the first day, Elara. I could hear you breathing. You knew?" "I was waiting for a chance to get you out," he said, pulling her deeper into the tunnel. Draven forced my hand. They ran through the damp earth, the sounds of shouting fading behind them. They emerged in the woods a mile from the manor. The winter air hit them like a slap. Vance stopped. He looked back at the manor glowing in the distance. He had lost everything: his rank, his honour, his life. "Go," he said, pointing north. "The rebel camp is in the Silver Valley. You know the way." Elara looked at him. "You killed a colonel. They will hunt you to the ends of the earth." "I know," Vance said. "I am a traitor now, just like you." "Come with me," Elara said impulsively. She grabbed his hand, the hand that had held the sword. "The rebellion needs men who know the king's strategies." Vance looked at her. He looked at the woman he had been ordered to kill, the woman he had watched through a knothole for a week, admiring her courage. "I am the enemy, Elara. Your men will shoot me on sight." "Not if you are with me," she said. "I am the Blackwood heir. If I vouch for you, they will listen." She squeezed his hand. "You saved my life, Silas. Let me save yours." Vance looked at the woods. He looked at the life he was leaving behind. It was a life of cold orders and brutal conquests. Then he looked at Elara. She was vibrant. She was alive. She was fighting for something real. He sheathed his sword. "Lead the way, my lady," he said softly. They walked into the trees together, the general and the rebel, leaving the war behind to start a new one, a better one. History tells us that General Vance died in the library fire that consumed Blackwood Manor that night, but local legends in the north tell a different story. They speak of a military strategist who joined the rebellion, a man who wore a grey uniform but fought for the Blackwood flag. They say he never left the Lady Elara's side, proving that sometimes the only way to win a war is to switch sides, and that brings us to the end of our secret. General Vance broke every oath he ever took to save the woman he admired. It's a dangerous thing, crossing the line for love. Now, I have a small mission for you, recruit. If this story made your heart race just a little, press that like button. Think of it as lighting a signal fire for others to find this safe haven. And if you want to be part of our resistance against boring, predictable stories, hit subscribe and ring the bell. It's the only way to receive your next briefing. Until then, stay hidden and keep your secrets safe.